All right, welcome everyone. My name is Jenny Malloy of Lights, Camera, Kale for Workplace Wellbeing, and this is our very special University of Rochester Women's Group webinar. You'll probably notice that I have a Rochesterian accent. I can't seem to get rid of it, and I love it. So also today joining me, we have this wonderful little yellow jacket. I'm sure you've gotten one at an event at some point. And my U of R mug, because now I feel complete. So today, let's dive in. I'm going to be talking about working remotely in this new, strange world that we are living in. Tips and tricks for an energized and balanced day, and talking about this idea of balance and what does that even mean, because it is going to be unique for each person. So let's dive in. And what is one thing that if you did it consistently would improve your health and happiness? Try to think of one thing that if you did this every day, every other day, it would improve your health and your happiness. And it might be two separate things. And write it down on a piece of paper. And I'm going to come back to this. And if you want to take it up another level, I can ask the same question, but reword it. What is one thing that if you did it consistently would improve your productivity or your business or your work? What is one thing that if you did in your work, it would improve your productivity every single day? And we will come back to the meaning of this, but write it down right now. And in the meantime, I do want to introduce myself and how I ended up here talking to you all about wellness. So my story actually starts with the University of Rochester. I got my degree in brain and cognitive science and always loved studying this idea that our behavior is guided by both our biochemistry, our neuroscience, and our psychology. And how can we use this knowledge to move us forward in a positive way with our happiness personally and also with productivity with our work? And after I went to U of R, actually part of U of R is I was a Take 5 scholar, and I got the opportunity to study opera and voice in Vienna, Austria. And I was so excited, but I had vocal damage. And I went to the doctor and I got to see my vocal cords on a camera. And at the time, my doctor told me to make some dietary changes. And at the time I thought, I already eat pretty healthy. I'm not overweight. Is that really going to make that big of a difference? Does that resonate with you? Have you ever been told to cut out dairy or cut down on sugar? And you're kind of like, well, is that really going to make that big of a difference? But I had nothing to lose, so I followed through. And the next time I went to my doctor's office, we looked at my vocal cords and they had completely healed. So I learned a few things that day. One, I learned that food has a huge impact on my body, much more than I ever thought. But also, I have a say in my health. I'm not doomed to whatever my genes are or whatever my parents have. I have a say in my health by the actions that I take on a day-to-day basis. Because let's face it, every day we're making decisions. Every single moment and every day we're making decisions either to support us or to self-sabotage ourselves in a way, right? So after U of R and after my Take 5, I went back to school for integrative nutrition and fell in love, started working with clients on their foods. And the more I worked with clients on their foods, the more we realized I don't need to tell you vegetables are good for you, right? I know a ton about food, but what you know doesn't mean you're necessarily going to implement it. And so I started bringing in my cognitive science background, thank you, U of R, and created my own methodology around well-being. So since that time, 8 years ago when I started my practice, I've worked with over 60 companies from LinkedIn to PayPal to Zara. I specialize in law firms and legal services. And I talk about a lot of different topics, from mental well-being to nutrition, sleep, productivity, work-life balance, and stress. I do one of two things. I lead workshops. I do one-on-one coaching where I sit down with employees and teammates and associates one-on-one for 20 minutes to see what's going on for you specifically and how can we target an action step to make you 10% better. Right? Because it's not like we're all falling apart here. Hopefully not. It's the premise of you're already awesome. How do we make you 10% better, 10% more productive, more efficient, more energized, more focused? So you can essentially step into your power, step into your flow, if you want to get real woo-woo. So there were a lot of different topics I wanted to address. And as you can tell throughout this workshop, I'm going to be touching on a little bit of each of those topics. Sometimes with companies, what I'll do is I will delve deeply into sleep. I'll delve deeply into nutrition and these topics. But today we're going to do a little smattering. However, before this webinar, everyone filled out a form and shared things that they wanted to cover. And as you can see, I created this beautiful word cloud where you can see these are some of the words that popped out: productive, motivated, healthy, work-life balance, time management, stress, boundaries, emotional wellness. Some people just want to have fun, laughter, excitement, exercise, fun. Well, we're not going to exercise during this workshop, but I hope you have fun and I hope you enjoy while you learn. So today, I am going to touch a little bit on eating and energy, finding balance, improving productivity, managing stress. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, and I'll also give you my contact. I'll give it to you now in case you want to write it down. It's hello@lckwellness.com. And then we have a little surprise at the end. So how to be energized and balanced while working from home. Let's dive in. Eat for energy. What does this mean? So for starters, food is energy. Every bite of food we take in is converted into a symphony of chemical substances that can either serve us by supporting your well-being or work against us by promoting inflammation. Inflammation is the chronic root of all disease. So what does this mean? It means that when we're eating, we're not just simply eating. We're not taught, to think about food as energy. When I was little, it's breakfast time, eat your breakfast. At school, it's your lunch period, you eat lunch. It's dinner time, we eat dinner. But in reality, there's a biochemical reaction that occurs when we eat food. And it also elicits an emotional response. So food makes us feel. So your task today, if you want to take one thing from this workshop, and what I will say is we're going over a lot of stuff today, so try to choose one thing or two things to focus on so you don't get overwhelmed, because overwhelm tends to lead to inaction. So if there's one thing you can take from this, start paying attention to how you feel after you eat certain foods. We're not taught, oh, I ate this food and now I feel sad, for instance. We're taught, I feel sad. Why do I feel sad? Oh, it could have been related to the biochemical reaction that occurred when I ate certain foods. We're not taught this. So start paying attention to how you feel after you have a meal. How do you want to feel? Do you want to feel energized, grounded, joyous, connected, loved? The answer is going to be different for every person, and the answer is going to be different depending on what is going on in your life in the moment. So if you want to feel energized, create a list of foods that energize you. Not foods that are healthy, because who cares? No one wants to be healthier. It's not enough motivation to eat well. Instead, what foods energize you? And you can't make this list until you start paying attention to how you feel after you have certain foods. But more importantly, if you're not actually hungry, How can you fulfill that need without being self-destructive? It's really easy to go to a default self-destructive activity. So how can we fulfill those needs without being self-destructive? Well, if you do want to feel love and you're craving something like ice cream, for instance, maybe you need a hug instead. Sounds cheesy and simple, but very, very salient. If you are feeling like you want chips and you want to crunch, 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 a lot of times this can be indicative of needing to talk, needing to move your mouth. Cravings are very interesting. I like to delve deeper into cravings. So we'll move forward for time's sake. So don't set rules for yourself. So who's ever been on a diet before? And who's ever been off that same diet? The whole idea of going on a diet implies that at some point you are going to come off that same diet. We're setting ourselves up for failure, and then we feel bad when we have strayed from a set of rules that didn't make sense in the first place. So I have this fun pink and purple steak and wine, because who loves steak and wine? Cool. Me too. If someone were to tell me that I can't have steak and wine, or maybe I set the own rule that I can't have steak and wine, this sets me up for rebellion. Why? Because I am a grown woman and I will eat and drink whatever I want at the end of the day, right? We have this little streak of rebellion in us that needs to be fulfilled sometimes. And by saying no to things, we set ourselves up for rebellion, because deprivation is not fun. Freedom is fun. Feeling good is fun. It's a much more positive way of framing things. But also, because my background's in brain and cognitive science, I do like to tie in the impact of your brain on your gut and vice versa. So there is something called a gut-brain axis, and you can see it in the slide here. Essentially, in the simplest way, is a communication system between your brain and your body, between your brain and your gut. And your gut produces neurotransmitters. We have 500 million neurons which are connected to and communicate with our brain. And research shows that your brain impacts your gut health, and your gut impacts your cognitive health. So this is important because the food we eat impacts our mood, not just on an idealistic kind of woo-woo way, but on a biochemical level. We have neurotransmitters in our gut. Serotonin, our happy chemical, is produced in our gut. So when we have gut damage from foods that we're eating that we may be sensitive to, or that our body doesn't like, it would make sense that this would impact our mood and hence our productivity. So the next part to being energized is finding balance, whatever that means. I created this workplace wellness wheel, and it's got different elements of our well-being on it. So you can see creativity, energy, productivity, work environment, home environment, physical activity, healthy eating, hydration, unplugging, relationships, stress and anxiety, sleep, creativity. It's not just healthy eating and exercise, right? There's so many different elements. And so how to use this wheel is I've ranked everything from 1 to 5. So if you want to write this down on your piece of paper, you can write down all the spokes. So a 1 means you are dissatisfied with this area of your life, like completely dissatisfied. 5 means you are really satisfied with this area of your life. And then we have the numbers in between. So what I want you to do now is look at the wheel, go around the wheel and circle, if you can, essentially pick out what you would rank yourself for each category, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. Go around your circle. I'll give you a moment to do that. All right, your moment's over. So first question I'll ask you, what are your highest categories? What are the categories you gave yourself a 5 or a 4 or maybe even a 3? What are the ones you feel good about? Now, what are your lowest categories? And I will say that everyone's wheel is going to look different. Just because one category is low for you doesn't mean you're doing poorly at it. It's all relative to how you feel about that area of your life. There's no right or wrong answer to this because no one's going to see your wheel. It's a method of reflection. So, what are your lowest categories? So, when I say this is a method for reflection, what I like to do is look at this wheel, and we tend to hyper focus our attention in one category. A good example of this is, those people that go to the gym every single day and they miss one day and they got to tell everyone. Meanwhile, the person that they're telling hasn't gone to the gym in months and they feel great. We tend to overemphasize one area when in reality, we might need more creativity in our life. We might need to work on our home environment, our relationships. But also, certain categories are going to impact other categories. So if you're not working out every day and it's something that you've been meaning to do, maybe you are setting yourself up for failure because you have other areas of your wheel that currently need your focus. So what if we could let go of the impossible, this high expectation of all the things you should be doing, and just focus on one at a time? You know what? I'm not working out right now, but it's because I want to focus on my relationships and my happiness. Or, you know what? I just looking at the wheel, I'm not eating, the perfect foods, but I'm focused on getting enough sleep every night. And what tends to happen is when we do nourish one area, other areas are impacted, right? Because when we do sleep more, our stress goes up, our stress resilience goes up. We tend to not crave foods that we normally would when we're stress eating. So it all impacts one another. So this is a form of reflection. Use this whenever you need to check in with yourself. And I'm actually going to go on to the science of motivation because a lot of people mention motivation as something that they struggle with. So Scott Geller, he's a behavioral therapist or behavioral psychologist who is a professor at Virginia Tech. He talks about what drives motivation. And there's a few things. One, he mentions competency. Do you feel confident at your work? Is a good example of this. Are you actively learning? So competency breeds confidence. And how do we become confident? We practice. People also feel confident through feedback, telling me I did a good job at something. And also, as an aside with feedback, there is a specific way to give feedback. Feedback needs to be timely. It needs to be time appropriate. If I did something really well, don't wait till my review to give me that feedback. So timely needs to be authentic. Don't just say someone did a nice thing because that was the right thing to say. Tell them something that you genuinely noticed in that moment. And the most important thing with feedback is that so it needs to be timely, it needs to be specific. There we go. Feedback needs to be specific. A good example of this is if I were working on a brief and editing a brief and I hand it over, and let's say I spent all night, or an hour working on this one paragraph. We can hyper focus on this one sentence or this one paragraph, making sure everything's perfectly crafted. And I hand over my brief and someone says, "You did a great job." I might feel good, or I might feel like there's blowing smoke up my rear end. I don't know if I can swear on this thing. So, however, so we don't know if people are being sarcastic or not. Like, hey, good job. Do they mean it? Is it authentic? And a good way to convey authenticity is to be specific. Hey, I noticed your wording on this paragraph. I thought it was really nicely and carefully written. Be specific with feedback. So we have competency, we have choice, a sense of autonomy. When you believe you have a sense of autonomy, a sense of choice in what you're doing, you feel more self-motivated. And then the third thing is community. People who perceive a sense of relatedness, and this is more relevant than ever now, a sense of connection with other people, they feel motivated and they're happier. So what do we do when something is more difficult, when we are feeling overwhelmed, when we all of a sudden find ourselves saying to ourselves, I wish I were more motivated. I wish I had motivation. I just don't have it. What's wrong with me? When something is difficult, we bring in distress, apathy, learned helplessness. And the answer when you get overwhelmed is to break it down. Break it down into parts, small pieces, bite-sized pieces. Hey, this whole project seems overwhelming, but what about step one? What is step one? I can do step one. Because what we tend to do is we tend to gravitate toward those things on our to-do list that are easy. They're easy, but they're not necessarily urgent. So the most important things on our to-do list, and this is going back to the beginning of the workshop, Steve Covey has his time management matrix. If you want to look into this, it's very interesting. We can actually rank tasks by urgency and importance. And a lot of times the things that move us forward with our productivity, with our health, with our happiness, they are important, but they're not urgent. So we tend to gravitate things that are easy, and maybe they're important, maybe they're not, and they tend to be urgent, the things that we reach for, but they're not necessarily the things that are going to move us forward. So it does take a certain amount of courage and bravery to choose the things that will move us forward, especially when they are not urgent. So, and I love this quote. So Scott Geller, just to sum this up and finish up this part, he says, we can always learn from each other. We need to have the humility to accept feedback and the courage to speak up. Ask for help when you need it. The hardest words in the English language to say are not I love you, they are I need help. Set priorities. So this is the next one. It can always feel like there's more to do, right? There's so many people whispering things in our ears about how we should be spending our time. We're just shooting all over the place. We're shooting all over each other, and we're shooting on ourselves. So what this means is that we're telling people, oh, you should be reading more. You should be doing puzzles for your, you should be writing a book. You should be doing so many things. But let's face it. And we tell ourselves these things. We should always be doing more. There's only so much you can do in a day. And if there's an endless amount of things that you can do in a day, when is enough enough? When is enough good enough? Only you can define when you've had a successful, fulfilling day. And part of this is setting priorities. So in the beginning of your day, write down what are your top priorities and maybe star 3 of them. 3 things that if you did those, you can tell yourself, I had a successful day. I feel good about that. And this is a wonderful quote from Marie Forleo. She says, when you know what's important, it's a lot easier to know what is not. It's a lot easier to know what is not. So it's not about saying no to things necessarily when we set boundaries. Actually, let's jump into boundaries because that is our next topic. We're not saying no to people. We're saying no to distractions. So setting boundaries is so important right now because we're working from home. We have no boundaries. We're creating this whole new microcosm, essentially, in which we work and ideally thrive. So physical cues are going to be important. What are physical cues when you are working from home? If you have this option, close a door. If you have a room that you're working in, close a door and communicate to those around you, this is my signal that I am working. Another physical cue, especially for those that don't have the option of closing a door, put on headphones, put on noise canceling headphones, and communicate to those around you that when I wear my noise canceling headphones, I am focused, I am dialed in. Please do not distract me. Separate home from your workspace. So create a workspace, declutter it to start your day. Communicate your boundaries in a positive way. So it's better to frame something as this is how I work best throughout my day, rather than don't distract me when my door is open. Pushes people away. Don't email me after 5, pushes people away. So it can be empowering to set boundaries. However, it depends on how we set those boundaries, and it can be off-putting and uncomfortable to set them in a negative way. So I like to instead say what you want. So when my door is closed, I'm working intently. I respond to emails from 9 to 6 p.m. And then follow through. The more consistent you can be with your actions, the more you are sharing with people that you respect your own boundaries. As soon as you stray from your boundaries that you ideally have communicated in a positive way, the sooner you communicate to others that they're not that important to you. And then also on this slide, I have say yes to say no. So there's a rule in improv that when you jump out on an improv scene, one of the first rules you learn is yes and. We want to yes and people. So an example of this is, let's say I'm doing an improv scene, I jump out and I say, wow, look, the sky, it's blue. And another improver jumps out and he's got to join my scene and he says, no, it's not. Kills the scene, right? You feel uncomfortable, I feel uncomfortable, I don't know what to say, we just start arguing on stage. However, if I were to jump out and say, wow, that sky is blue, and he comes out and says, yeah, and it's got little pink streaks in it. We're building a scene, we're working together on something. So an example of yes anding in business and in your work is if you're working on a project that you need to be heads down focused on and not distracted, if someone just sends you one of those emails, hey, can you just send me this email? Can you just, those quick emails we get, hey, people ask quick questions. Quick questions are never quick questions because they always require follow-up thought and taking you out of your focus, out of your zone. Not only that, but when we have to move our attention across multiple stimuli, we are going to impair our ability to process for both of them. Right? They're competing, both these tasks, for neural representation. So saying yes to say no is, hey, can you just work on this project for me? Yes, I can. And I'm focused on something right now. I can get to it tomorrow. Yes, I can. And I can get to this on Friday. Try to yes and people. It's much more important, much more comfortable, essentially. And also expect distractions. There's going to be a little bit of chaos in everyone's life and in everyone's home. Try not to get angry at people and instead try to go with the natural flow of your home. I'll give you an example. I had a session with someone who works in her kitchen. It's the only option she has. And she was getting frustrated because every morning people came down for breakfast, they're chatting, she's trying to focus, then they come down for lunch, everyone's distracting her. So instead we had a discussion about when is her household naturally quiet. And for her, it was the late afternoon. So then we designated that as her focus time, and we communicated that to the people in her home so that everyone was on the same page in a positive way, of course. Remove distractions. So on your phone, you can turn off notifications. You can turn off those ding, They're so addictive, and they are addictive because they release dopamine in your brain from this pleasure point in your brain called the nucleus accumbens. It says, I like this, I want more. We get that little dopamine rush that is very addictive in itself every time we do something on a to-do list. Ding, oh, this is fun, I like this. So by removing this, we can remove more distractions so we can focus and not be multitasking. And I have close email on here. If you are working on something that's really important, try closing your email and maybe set an alarm on your phone to check it an hour from now. Depending on what is acceptable for you. What is the maximum amount of time that if you were to respond to an email, you would be okay in your job? Because I work with some people, especially attorneys, that need to be on the ball. They need to be constantly responding to things in a timely fashion. However, what is realistically the maximum amount of time that you can wait before you send an email? And close your email and set a timer so that you can focus and optimize your work time when you are in focus mode. So they actually did a study at Microsoft, and they found that employees spent an average of nearly 10 minutes switching to email after receiving an alert, plus an additional 10 to 15 minutes on other diversions before getting back to the task they had been working on prior to receiving the alert. Sound familiar? 27% of the time, they did not get back to the original task for more than 2 hours. And this is because what we were talking about, multiple stimuli are present in the visual field. When this happens, they have to compete for neural representation. And throughout your visual cortex, their activity gets suppressed. Your processing capacity goes down. Your productivity goes down. What's also interesting about this is that people that thought they were the best multitaskers turned out to be the worst multitaskers. And so if you have a pen and paper in front of you, and so I know you all are watching this recording now. Let's see. So if you have pen and paper in front of you and you want to do an exercise, this is what I normally do in companies. You draw 4 lines. And on the first 2 lines, time yourself writing the words, I am a good multitasker on the first line, numbers 1 through 20 on the second line. Do not cheat and write 1 through 20. People have done that before. Write all the actual numbers, 1 through 20. So I am a good multitasker, 1 through 20. Time yourself. The second time you do it, on the next 2 lines, write the same things except do 1 letter, 1 number. 1 letter, 1 number. So I, 1, A, 2, M, 3, A, 4. I am a good It'll say the exact same thing. However, you're going to be going back and forth between processing letters and processing numbers. How does this impact your speed and your focus? If you're laughing while you do the second part of this, you did the exercise right, because it's a little more difficult and usually it takes about 40% longer. So managing stress. So there's this wonderful quote by Lao Tzu, and what he says is, if you're living in the past, I got this. If you're living in the past, you're depressed. If you're living in the future, you're anxious. And if you're living in the present, then you're at peace. I like this quote because sometimes this idea of stress can be kind of ambiguous, right? And I like this idea of thinking of that as when we think about things in the past, so we're dwelling on things that we said, things that we could have said differently, things we wish we had done differently, we can almost associate this with depressive feelings. And then if we think about things in the future, things that aren't yet in our control, running to-do lists through our head, anticipating things, we can almost associate this with anxiety. A little bit of both are actually good, right? A little bit of reflecting on the past can be helpful. Can help you reflect on what you've done and how you can change your behavior. A little bit of anxiety, good, right? It pushes us. But too much of that, and we start feeling the pains of it. We start feeling self-destructive. So your task with stress, which let's define stress as simply, especially of the future tense, moving too fast. When do you start feeling physical symptoms? When does constructive anxiety turn into destructive anxiety? And you can tap into what are the physical symptoms. Does your neck tense up, your jaw tense up? Do you get, does your digestion get messy, or your sleep get interrupted? Does your eyes start twitching? What are the physical cues that you may be stressed? And so now I have this adorable lion. He's so cute. And the leaves are boring. But I do want to talk about the autonomic nervous system just for a moment. And the reason for this is whenever someone talked about relaxing and mentioning themselves that I should imagine myself on a beach and just think positive thoughts, I couldn't really relate to that because I have stuff to do. I don't have time to imagine myself on a beach and relax. But it wasn't until I understood the science behind stress that I wanted to implement it. So this is what I want to share. There's two branches that I want to focus on of your autonomic nervous system, one being sympathetic and the other being parasympathetic. Sympathetic is if a lion were chasing you, what would you do? You'd run. You'd probably run really fast. Your heart would start pumping oxygen really quickly to get away from danger. While this is in place for our survival, we don't have to run away from lions on our lunch breaks, but we do experience small stressors. What kind of, and on your piece of paper, you can write this down. What are your top 3 stressors? What are your top 3 stressors? And it's going to vary from day to day. Before COVID-19 and this wacky world that we're living in, it was commuting for a lot of people. Deadlines can be a small stressor. Pressure that we put on ourselves, expectations that we put on ourselves, and expectations of others, worrying about friends and family. These are all little stressors. Over time, these little stressors, your brain cannot differentiate between a lion chasing you and you having high expectations to perform at work. Are you worrying about your job security? One is life-threatening. The other may not be, not in the way that a lion is, at least. However, on a physiological level, your brain starts to process them in the same way. Parasympathetic, on the other side, we have rest and digest. This is when you happen to digest your food better, but also you feel grounded, you feel calm, you have creative, calm, focused thinking. The good news is we can actually trick our brains into going from sympathetic state into parasympathetic. How we do this, it goes back to your brain and your body being on a feedback loop. Remember we talked about this? So just as my brain says, danger, lion, and tells my heart to start speeding up its breathing, if I were to adopt the slow rhythmic breathing patterns of the relaxed state, the grounded state, I trick my brain into thinking, I'm not going to die. There's not a lion in my room. Whatever the lion is for you. So for this reason, breathing, slowing our breathing can actually cause us to be more productive, more focused. It can improve our attention. And just as a breathing exercise you can try, there's something called 5-5-7 breathing. And I do this with all the companies that I work with when we do a stress management workshop, but you breathe in for a count of 5. So 3, 4, 5, hold the breath up top, 2, 3, 4, 5, breathe out slowly, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, breathe in. And while you're breathing in, so breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 7. We're not going to do the full thing now, just for the sake of time. So you're going to breathe in through your nose. So we're going to be gently sealing our lips, relaxing our face, relaxing our cheeks, our eyelids, our forehead, relaxing your body as much as possible, and just breathing in and out of your nose. So you're completely emptying your air each time. I look like a complete weirdo doing it, and I might sound like Darth Vader because it's something called the Ujjayi breath, if you want to look that up. However, really, really powerful way to reset and focus. Great thing to try in the morning, and it's a great way to flood your brain with oxygen. And then take breaks. We are living as a culture under the collective delusion that in order to succeed, we have to burn out along the way. So wind down every night. And they actually did a study, because what is the main thing that everyone does before they go to bed? We dawdle around on our phones. It's easy, it's mindless, it's just a go-to item to go for. However, our phones emit blue light that emulates the sky outside. It's almost like our phones are telling our brains, hey, stay up, it's still daylight. You need to go hunting or foraging or whatever our evolutionary brain or our caveman brain wanted to do. So they did a study, and they found that the blue light on your computer screen, it's coming from your computer screens as well, from 9 to 11 p.m., it shortened the total sleep time, suppressed melatonin production, diminished your sleep quality, and increased nighttime awakenings, prevented the body temperature from dropping, which is really important for your sleep, and it altered your circadian rhythms, those natural biorhythms that allow you to wake up and regulate your hormones and be energetic during the day when you should be, and go to sleep at night. But the interesting thing about this is that red light exposure during the same 2-hour period did not interfere with sleep or circadian rhythms, and the body temperature of these participants lowered as well. So what this means for you is there's this nifty trick on your phone. It's called night shift mode by Apple. And what you can do, if you have your phone right now, pull out your phone, go to settings, go down to display. I think it's called display and brightness. Switch on night shift mode. You can time it so that every night, let's say from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., not only are you not receiving those alerts, those distracting alerts that keep us awake and keep us engaged in our phone and hooked onto our phone with all those wonderful shots of dopamine, but also it's going to, it'll say cool to warm on a slider. You can actually move your slider to warm, and that will activate that red light that tells you, oh, this is not the daylight. I'm okay. This will allow me to sleep better. And so here's some blue light solutions. Apple's Night Shift Mode, F.Lux is a free software you can download for your computer. Lighting Science has good night bulbs. Mobile device cutoff time. So have a time where you put your phone to bed. Put your phone to bed. Do some light reading. Do something that is maybe something that you did when you were a kid. Read comic books, read Calvin Hobbes, read Harry Potter, read poetry. And then lutein and zeaxanthin, bilberry extract, grapeseed extract, these are all antioxidants. So we covered a lot of stuff today, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the workshop, don't want you to do everything, right? Because overwhelm leads to inaction. So I want you to look at your notes or think about all the topics that we covered this workshop and pick one thing that you can implement this week. Something that you can implement tonight or tomorrow. One thing that doesn't feel overwhelming. And I want you to write it down on your piece of paper. So thank you so much for joining me. I would love to connect with all of you. Again, my name is Jenny Malloy. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn right now and type in Lights, Camera, Kale, follow our LinkedIn page. I would love to stay in touch with all of you, and I am regularly posting videos, video content, interviews, tips, things to help with your happiness, your productivity, your well-being. You can email me with any questions at hello@lckwellness.com, and then you can go to my website at lightscamerakale.com. So let me know if you have any questions. And oh, I mentioned that there was a surprise at the end. So every U of R event that I go to, they always sing the Genesee at the very end. And so I pulled this up with the lyrics so you can sing along. And we'll just sing this to end our wonderful little webinar. And a 1, and a 2, and a 3. Full many fair and famous streams beneath the sun there be, yet more to us than any seems our own dear Tennessee. We love thy banks and stately falls, for to our minds they bring our dear old alma mater's halls, where sweetest memories cling, as flows the river gathering force along her steadfast way. May we along life's devious course grow stronger day by day, and may our hearts where'er we roam forever loyal be to our beloved college home beside the Genesee. Woo! Go U of R. Thank you everyone so much for joining me. Again, I'm Jenny Malloy of Lights, Camera, Kale for Workplace Wellbeing. I hope everyone has an awesome day, and Meliora.